The rain was still clinging to her coat when she stepped inside the marble lobby, her shoes squeaking softly against the polished floor. The air smelled faintly of perfume and money, the kind of sterile, expensive scent that made people like her feel out of place before they even opened their mouths. "Ma'am," the receptionist called out, her eyes glancing down at the frayed edges of Emma's scarf. "This entrance is for clients and executives only." Emma hesitated, clutching the folder in her hands. Inside it was everything she needed: proof, documents, the kind of thing that could change her life if only she could get someone to look at it. She had spent weeks preparing for this meeting, skipping meals to save bus fare, staying up late to make sure every page was perfect. I have an appointment," she said quietly. Before the receptionist could respond, the elevator opened and a tall man in an immaculate suit stepped out. His voice sliced through the room like glass. "Is this some kind of joke?" he said, staring directly at Emma. The lobby quieted instantly. "You're here for a meeting? Dressed like that?" The words echoed in the marble space. A few people nearby turned to look. Emma felt her cheeks burn, but she didn't move. "I'm here to see Mr. Caldwell," she said. He laughed, a cold, sharp sound that wasn't really amusement but performance. "You think you can just walk in here with muddy shoes and a thrift store coat, and we're supposed to take you seriously? Do you even know what this place is?" She knew exactly what this place was. Caldwell and Hartman, one of the most powerful investment firms in the city. She also knew who he was. Alexander Hartman, the kind of man who built his reputation on stepping on anyone who got in his way. The receptionist shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The man's voice rose. "Let me make this simple for you. This building is for people who belong. People who work hard, succeed, and dress like they respect themselves. Not for charity cases." Something inside Emma twisted. She wanted to shout, to tell him exactly why she was there, to throw the folder in his face. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she lowered her eyes and said softly, "I'll be back." He smirked, already turning away. "Sure you will." The elevator doors closed behind him. Emma stood there for a moment, her hands trembling. The humiliation burned in her chest, but behind it, another feeling began to take shape, cold, sharp, and certain. She had been underestimated before, ignored before, but this time, she had something they didn't know. It had started 3 weeks earlier, when Emma was cleaning offices at night. Most of the time, she kept her head down, earbuds in, mop in hand. But that night, as she emptied the trash in one of the top-floor conference rooms, she overheard two men talking in hushed voices. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. She was about to leave when one of them mentioned a name she recognized. Caldwell. The conversation was fast, tense. Something about the missing accounts, shifting funds, and it has to be gone before the audit. She froze, pretending to dust the table as they left. Later, curiosity, and maybe a touch of desperation, pushed her to check the bin she had just emptied. Inside, beneath crumpled coffee cups and discarded pens, was a shredded memo. Emma wasn't the kind of person to ignore something like that. She stayed up all night, piecing the strips together on her kitchen table. By dawn, she was staring at a half-reconstructed document that made her stomach turn. It hinted at millions of dollars quietly disappearing into offshore accounts, and the signatures at the bottom were Caldwell's and Hartman's. She wasn't stupid. She knew the kind of men she was dealing with, the kind who could destroy someone's life without lifting a finger. But she also knew she couldn't just throw the papers away. Over the next 2 weeks, she collected more scraps from shredders, forgotten printouts, copies left in recycling bins. She pieced them together like a puzzle, building a quiet, dangerous case. And then she requested a meeting. Now, standing in that lobby after Hartman's public humiliation, she understood. She was never going to get in through the front door. She took the bus home in silence, the folder heavy in her lap. The city blurred past the window, neon signs bleeding into the wet night. She replayed the moment over and over in her mind. His smirk, the way people stared, the heat in her face. By the time she reached her apartment, her humiliation had hardened into resolve. If they wouldn't listen when she came politely, she would make them listen another way. Emma's apartment was a cramped one room with peeling paint and a window that rattled when the wind blew. On her kitchen table, she spread out the papers again, double-checking each one. The numbers were clear. The dates matched. The signatures were undeniable. She didn't just have suspicion anymore. She had proof. But proof meant nothing if no one saw it. And people like Caldwell and Hartman, they made sure no one with power wanted to see it. She thought about the options. Police? Too easy to bury. News outlets? Risky. Half of them were funded by people just like Caldwell. Then she remembered something. The shareholders' meeting. It was in 2 weeks. Every major investor, board member, and executive would be there. If she could get inside and present what she had in front of everyone, they couldn't silence her without witnesses. It was reckless, dangerous, but she had nothing left to lose. The next 2 weeks were a blur. Emma spent nights practicing what she would say, cutting her speech down to its sharpest points. She borrowed a simple black dress from her neighbor, patched the hem herself, and bought a pair of second-hand heels from a thrift shop. She also studied the building. Which entrances were guarded? Which ones weren't? How the security badges worked. On the morning of the meeting, she arrived early, blending into the crowd of assistants and caterers. Her heart was a drum in her chest, but her face was calm. She waited until the main presentation was underway before making her move. The conference hall was a cathedral of glass and light, filled with rows of chairs facing a massive screen. At the front, Caldwell was speaking, his voice smooth and confident as he boasted about profits and growth. Hartman sat beside him, scanning the crowd with that same smirk Emma had seen in the lobby. She waited until the applause after one of Caldwell's points. Then she stood. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying just enough to be heard in the sudden quiet. "I have something the shareholders should see." Heads turned. Hartman's expression shifted, recognition flickering in his eyes. Security began moving toward her. Emma took a deep breath and lifted the folder. "Before you take another word from these men, you should know where your money really went." The room shifted instantly. Conversation stopped. A ripple of unease ran through the investors seated in the front rows. Hartman's smirk was gone, replaced by a hard, flat stare. Caldwell leaned forward at the podium, his voice sharp. "This is a private meeting," he said. "Security, not so private when it's about other people's money," Emma cut in. Her voice wasn't loud, but the silence around her made every word land. "Not so private when you've been stealing it." The gasps were immediate. Murmurs broke out in the back. 2 security guards reached her, one on each side, their hands ready to drag her out. But Emma didn't back away. She opened the folder, and before they could stop her, began scattering the reconstructed documents onto the floor in front of the stage. Sheets slid under the feet of the front row shareholders, some bending down to pick them up out of reflex. "Fraud," she said clearly. "Shell companies, offshore accounts. Missing millions." She pointed toward Caldwell, his signature. Then to Hartman, his approval. The guards grabbed her arms, but she twisted enough to face the crowd again. "Check the dates. Check the numbers. They took your money, and they're counting on you not to ask questions." One of the shareholders, a woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, had already begun scanning the papers. Her expression changed, her lips tightening. These look like internal memos." "They are," Emma said. Caldwell stepped away from the podium. voice dripping with contempt. "You expect anyone to believe you? You're—" He stopped himself, but the sneer in his tone finished the sentence for him. "You're nothing. I expect them to read," Emma replied. The security guards pulled her toward the exit, but now the silver-haired woman stood. "Hold on," she said. Her voice carried authority, the kind that made people listen. "Let her speak." Caldwell's jaw tightened. "Margaret, this is—" "Let her speak." It was the first crack in the fortress. The guards hesitated. All eyes were now on Emma. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "3 weeks ago, I was cleaning offices in this building. That's when I overheard a conversation about missing accounts and an upcoming audit. I didn't know what it meant, but I found this." She held up a single page, the one she had kept in perfect condition, the memo with both their signatures. "In the trash." I pieced together the rest from documents they threw away without thinking anyone like me would care enough, or be smart enough, to notice. Hartman's face was stone. Caldwell's was flushed. "They didn't expect me to understand," she continued. "They didn't expect me to keep it. But I did. Because it's not just your money they're taking. It's the trust that keeps this place standing." A man in the second row leaned forward, flipping through one of the pages. "These figures, they're not in last quarter's report." "Of course they're not," Emma said. "That's the point." Caldwell stepped forward, voice raised. "This woman is trespassing, disrupting a private event, and making outrageous claims with stolen documents. They were in the trash," Emma cut in. "If you throw away the truth, don't be surprised when someone picks it up." The line seemed to hang in the air. A few people in the crowd murmured in agreement. Margaret, the silver-haired shareholder, looked at the guards. "If you remove her without reviewing this, you'll regret it." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Finally, Caldwell forced a laugh. "Fine, let her talk. And when she's done, I'll show you how easily these lies fall apart." Emma knew this was the moment she had to make count. She stepped forward, the guards reluctantly releasing her arms. The microphone at the podium was still warm from Caldwell's grip. She adjusted it and took a breath. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone," she began. "That's what people like them do to people like me. I came here because I believe in something they forgot about a long time ago, that your word should mean something. That when you say you're taking care of someone's money, you're not secretly moving it where it disappears." She spoke plainly, without jargon, but with a precision that made the room lean in. She walked them through the dates, the transactions, the names of the shell companies. She pointed out where Caldwell had signed off on transfers just days before quarterly reports, transfers that moved funds to accounts tied to Hartman's network. Every few moments, she would glance at the audience, making eye contact with the people holding the papers she had thrown. She could see doubt turning into realization. When she finished, she set the remaining documents on the podium. "I'm not here to ask for a job. I'm not here for a payout. I'm here because you deserve to know the truth about the men you've been trusting with your investments." The silence was heavier now. Caldwell's smile had vanished entirely. Hartman's eyes were locked on her, cold and calculating. Margaret was the first to break it. "I move that we halt the current meeting and convene an emergency review committee, effective immediately." Caldwell's voice snapped. "This is ridiculous." "No," Margaret said firmly. "What's ridiculous is ignoring this until the auditors arrive and the press gets hold of it. If even half of what she's saying is true, this company is in serious legal jeopardy." The room erupted into conversation. Some voices were raised, others hushed. Caldwell tried to regain control, but for the first time, Emma saw something in his expression that looked like fear. After the meeting dissolved into chaos, security escorted her out, but this time not like an intruder, more like a witness being shielded from a storm. On the sidewalk outside, Margaret caught up with her. You took a hell of a risk, she said. Do you have copies? Emma nodded. Everything's backed up. Margaret's lips curved into the faintest smile. Good. Don't trust anyone too quickly, even the people who look like they're on your side. And then she was gone, swept back into the building. Emma stood there for a long moment, feeling the cold air bite her skin. She didn't know what would happen next if they tried to discredit her, if the truth would be buried under lawyers and PR statements. But she knew this. She was no longer invisible. The wind whipped through the street, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust. Emma pulled her coat tighter, but the chill that ran through her wasn't from the weather. She'd been standing in front of giants, and for the first time, they had actually listened, or at least they'd been forced to. But power like Caldwell's and Hartman's didn't crumble in a day. By the time she reached her apartment, her phone, an old, scratched model she'd had for years, was buzzing with unknown numbers. She didn't answer. The few voicemails that came through were a mix of vague threats and patronizing offers to clarify the misunderstanding if she met privately with the right people. She deleted them all. At 2 a.m, there was a knock at her door. 3 short raps, deliberate, like someone who expected her to open without hesitation. She stayed quiet, heart pounding. Another knock, this time harder. Emma, a voice called. Male, low, controlled. We just want to talk. She didn't move. The knocking continued for a few minutes, then stopped. She heard footsteps retreat down the hall. She stayed awake until the first light crept through the blinds, every creak of the building making her flinch. By the next day, she realized they weren't going to let her slip away quietly. Her job at the cleaning company was suspended pending review. The manager wouldn't say why, but she didn't need an explanation. At the corner store, the clerk who'd always been friendly wouldn't meet her eyes. It wasn't just fear she was feeling now. It was the creeping reach of influence. Caldwell and Hartman didn't have to say her name. All they had to do was let people know she was trouble. That afternoon, as she sat in the laundromat folding clothes, Margaret walked in. It was like seeing a figure from another world in the fluorescent hum of the machines. Her coat was cashmere, her boots gleamed, but her eyes were sharp and purposeful. You're hard to find, Margaret said, setting a coffee cup on the table in front of Emma. On purpose, Emma replied. Margaret sat across from her. You rattled them yesterday, more than you realize. The board is split. Half want an investigation, half want to bury it. Caldwell is pushing hard to paint you as unstable, desperate, a liar. Emma gave a humorless smile. That's not exactly a stretch for them, is it? Maybe not, Margaret admitted. But you have something rare, leverage. I've been on that board for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of dirt swept under a lot of rugs. The difference is, you've already put yours in the middle of the room. They can't just pretend it's not there. Emma looked at her, searching for the angle. So why are you here? To warn me? To help you. Why? Margaret hesitated for a moment, then said, Because I've lost before. I've been in rooms where men like Caldwell laughed while they erased everything I'd worked for. I swore if I ever had the chance to make it hurt for someone like that, I'd take it. Emma leaned back, studying her. And I'm your chance. Margaret didn't deny it. There's a second shareholders meeting in a week. If you can hold out until then, I can get you a spot on the agenda. Officially. No security dragging you out. Emma almost laughed. If I can hold out, they've already sent people to my door. I can arrange protection, Margaret said. But you have to understand, the second you stand up there again, they'll come at you harder. Not just them. Everyone who has something to lose if you win. Emma's hands curled around the coffee cup. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it because they don't get to decide who matters. Margaret's eyes softened, but only slightly. Good. Because you're going to need to remember that. The days that followed were a test of endurance. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. A strange car idling outside her building. Notes slipped under her door. Stop now, before it gets worse. One evening, as she was leaving the grocery store, Hartman himself was waiting by the entrance. His suit was perfect, his smile thin. "Emma," he said, as if greeting an old friend, "you're making a lot of noise." She kept walking, but he matched her pace. "Do you know what happens to people who try to make themselves bigger than they are?" He asked lightly, like they were chatting about the weather. "They get crushed. Not because anyone wants to. It's just the way the world works." Emma stopped. "Then maybe it's time the world works differently." Hartman chuckled. "Cute, but you're in over your head. You think Margaret's going to save you? She'll use you and toss you aside the second it benefits her." "Maybe," Emma said, "but I'll still sleep better than you." For a flicker of a moment, something cold and sharp flashed in his eyes. Then the smile returned. "Last chance, Emma. Walk away." She walked past him without another word. The night before the meeting, Margaret called. "They've stacked the room with allies," she said. "You'll have a hard time winning a majority. But if you make them doubt Caldwell, even for a minute, it could be enough to open a formal investigation." Emma sat at her table, the folder of documents in front of her. She had gone over them so many times, she could recite the dates and amounts from memory. But this wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about showing everyone exactly who Caldwell and Hartman really were. When she hung up, she wrote down one final sentence on the last page of her notes. Not for the investors. Not for Margaret, for herself. They made me invisible. I'm going to make them unforgettable. The morning of the meeting, she woke before sunrise. The streets were quiet, the city holding its breath. She put on the black dress again, repaired and pressed, the same thrift store heels. Her hair was neatly tied back. At the entrance to the conference hall, Margaret was waiting. She gave Emma a small nod, approval, maybe even respect. Inside, the air was thick with money and power. Caldwell was already at the front, shaking hands, smiling as if nothing could touch him. Hartman scanned the room with that same calculating gaze. Emma felt their eyes on her as she walked to her seat near the stage. The weight of their contempt pressed on her shoulders, but she didn't let it bend her. The meeting began. And this time, she was on the agenda. Margaret's voice carried over the room. "Next, we have an unscheduled but approved presentation from Emma Hayes regarding financial accountability." There was a small ripple of surprise among the shareholders, some curious, others already annoyed. Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Emma rose, feeling the subtle shift in the room. Last time she had been here, she'd been an intruder. Now she was on record. It didn't mean they respected her yet, but it meant they had to listen. She stepped up to the podium, her hands steady on the edges. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm. "Some of you already know me. Most of you don't, but I know this company. Not from the top floors or the glossy reports, from the spaces you never see. The empty offices at midnight. The trash bins where paper and ink tell stories you'd rather not hear." She saw a few glances exchange in the crowd. She pressed on. "I came here before, and I was told I didn't belong. That my clothes, my job, my life made me invisible. But invisibility is a gift when you're looking for the truth, because no one notices what you notice." Emma held up a single page, the memo with both Caldwell's and Hartman's signatures. "This was one of the first things I found. I wasn't looking for it. I was doing my job. But it led me to more. And the more I found, the clearer it became. Millions of dollars moved into accounts you don't control, to companies that don't exist outside of a file folder in an offshore bank." A murmur swept through the crowd. "I'm not here to convince you to believe me," Emma continued. "I'm here to ask you to believe the numbers, the dates. The signatures. She pointed at Caldwell. This isn't about me and him. It's about you, the people who trusted him with your investments, and what he did with that trust. Caldwell laughed, but it was thin and unconvincing. This is absurd. She's a cleaner. She's a cleaner who knows how to read, Emma said sharply. A cleaner who understands that when you hide money, it's not an accident. And a cleaner who refuses to be silent when the truth is in her hands. The room quieted again. Emma took a slow breath. Some of you will think I'm reckless, that I should have walked away when I had the chance. But I've lived my whole life being told to keep my head down, to be grateful for scraps. And I'm telling you now, I'd rather lose everything than let men like this decide who matters. She placed the documents on the podium. You have the proof. You have the power. The question is, will you use it? She stepped back. For a long, heavy moment, no one spoke, and Margaret stood. I move for an immediate independent investigation into all transactions involving offshore accounts in the last 3 years, with Caldwell and Hartman suspended pending review. The room broke into competing voices, some shouting in agreement, others in protest. A vote was called. Hands went up. Slowly, the tide shifted. Margaret counted, then announced, "Motion carries." Caldwell's face went pale. Hartman's fists clenched at his sides. It was done. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, Caldwell approached her. His voice was low, venom threading each word. You think you've won something here? This isn't over. Emma looked at him, unflinching. No, it's just started. For you. He stared at her for a beat, then turned sharply and walked away. Margaret joined her a moment later. You did well. Better than I expected. Emma exhaled slowly. Does this really change anything? Margaret's gaze was steady. It changes that they can't pretend you don't exist. And sometimes that's the beginning of everything. In the weeks that followed, the story leaked, not from Emma, but from somewhere inside the board. The press tore into the scandal, names splashed across headlines. Caldwell and Hartman were forced to step down pending investigation. Emma was offered interviews, TV appearances, even a book deal. She turned most of them down. Fame wasn't what she'd been after. But one day, she walked past the lobby where it had all started. The same receptionist, the same marble floors. This time, no one stopped her. No one told her she didn't belong. She stood in the center of the lobby for a moment, letting the memory of that first humiliation wash over her. The sting was gone. In its place was something quiet, steady, and unshakable. Respect, not because they'd given it to her, but because she'd taken it. That night, back in her apartment, she opened the folder one last time. She didn't need to keep the papers anymore. They were in the hands of investigators now, but she ran her fingers over them anyway. They were the proof that had turned her from invisible to undeniable. She thought about all the people like her, the ones who cleaned the floors, carried the trays, answered the phones, and how many truths were hidden in plain sight because no one ever thought to look. She smiled to herself. They had underestimated her, and she had made them remember her forever.